Oh, good. Did you find Derek?
Yeah.
Was he sort of helpful?
Oh, yes.
Like he's mad.
Brilliantly helpful.
Well, no, he was helpful last time, but he said it didn't stick. So he's.
No, it's not computer. It's just,
Oh.
you know, you get the upgrades and then it goes.
I know. Yeah, he fixes everything I have.
And if you need anything, we've got printed out as well, just as a backup. We are. Yeah.
No, we're not. No, we're not. Because he's not the right fit. I knew it though. I mean, we knew she was like 2 steps ahead in another district.
It's unbelievable. See, they had such weak candidates over there in Watertown.
Oh my God.
Friday, Christmas, time she was taking the job, and Sunday night, and the Texas change it. I thought I was just gonna. I don't think so.
That's
Maybe
about 10.
About 10 more thousand? So she must have got
10 more
130.
thousand.
130?
10 more thousand. I think we have enough to scoot down here.
Okay, I can't bend over like that for more than 2 minutes. Oh, man.
Gave you a lot of credit for that.
Thank you.
Oh, the Friday.
My thing. I'm well. How are you? Come on, sit by me.
Here you
Do you want
go.
me sitting up here, or you want me sitting in the crowd
Oh,
until
here you
7:30?
go.
You know you want to sit by us. We're fine.
Here you go.
There you go.
That's the draw.
I'll sit next
Plus,
to
you're
you.
going to be talking about money and all the fun stuff associated with money.
I like money.
Well,
I like it when
with
I
your
have
budget
money.
doesn't have it in it.
I,
You notice that?
Kids
Did you?
don't have money. You're in education. We don't have.
we're public schools.
I say that all the time. People say blah 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 blah. I'm like, you know, I'm working in schools, right? That's my general like instant comeback, and you're like, oh, okay, fine. We'll give you the local guy discount.
You get the little look and the little pat.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Do not work for a hedge fund,
No.
even though that sounds lovely for about a month.
Did you used to? Did you work?
No, I
for
work for Merrill Lynch, but in like Ohio, not New York. So
Gotcha.
not quite the same. In Florida. But yes.
Oh.
I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Gotcha, but it got quiet. Somebody listened to me. I never get listened to.
You're in charge.
If we could rise for the pledge, please.
These are educators. They listen.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As I mentioned, we are currently in the Finance Committee meeting. I did not receive any public comment via email, nor do I see any public in the audience, but I will do the formality of asking if there's any public comment. Going once, going twice, closing the public comment section. Discussion of possible action per our usual routine at this meeting. If David could take us through the financial management summary ending September 30th, it would be greatly appreciated.
I would be happy to. Thank you for having me back. No laughing, Ed. So I attached a couple documents to a shared drive and a summary memo just later this afternoon. The summary memo is substantially the same as it was last month. But what is new is the high-level summary, which we haven't had before. I thought this might be a good way to talk about it going forward. I did put the detail in there as well, just so you had it, so you know that I'm not crazy and making stuff up. I hope that's on camera. Bad joke. So starting at the beginning, certified staff. Right now, we still have not finished the encumbrance for this current year and non-certified staff, so I hope to have that done in the next couple days. So I apologize. I really wanted it done by this meeting, but it's not quite there. But I have no reason to believe that we're going to be substantially off. We are watching certain positions, substitutes, paraprofessionals. There are a number of positions that have been difficult to fill. So we're still watching that, and for every month that goes by that they're not filled, if they were budgeted appropriately, there should be some, in theory, savings there. With that said, we are also working on 2 union contracts. Both are expired, the custodial and the para, so there may be some retros that go into this year that aren't accounted for yet. We talked about this a little bit last month, but employee benefits, health insurance, that specific line is still running higher than anticipated. Employee benefits as a whole is not way off, but the health insurance component is higher than expected at this, or higher than budgeted, not higher than expected.
I think we had talked last month about if you could inquire as to whether the town is running in the same direction, because I do believe we plugged in the same anticipated amount of increase year over year. So we had the question of whether the town is in the same situation.
I think that's I don't have the answer for you tonight on that. I apologize. We spent some time at the union negotiation meetings talking about health insurance and forecasts, and we've spent the time on that component not getting this, so I apologize back for not getting that quickly to you, but I will make that note to get that to you ASAP.
And could I ask another question on that line, the 52529 insurance line is currently showing negative, but have we paid for the year, or is that something we are going to just continue?
No, we encumbered for the year, so we haven't paid for it.
There's actually nothing there to be encumbered lines.
Hold on 1 second, let me pull it up.
Or the column.
Let's see, what line are you talking about?
In the summary of 520 to 529.
Yes. Gosh, that's weird. There is an encumbrance on the detail, so that didn't carry forward.
Okay.
But I will go back and double check that.
All right. But in other words, that hole will not continue to grow.
No, if anything, it'll shrink,
Okay.
but again, there is a hole there.
Okay.
And it'll shrink because the employee contributions will come in each pay cycle. So that's what happens. You encumber the whole amount, and then pieces start to come back.
All right.
All right, moving down, insurance, very close to what was budgeted. That is fully encumbered and paid. So we're about $26,000 over on a relatively small line item. So a $35 million budget, $268,000, we're 10% over. But again, it's not impactful to the overall budget. The one I do want to highlight again, I highlighted it last month, or I guess Marie highlighted it last month, was tuition. And this is special ed tuition. I think we did budget appropriately. The challenge, though, is the budget was reduced by about $189,000, and it wasn't designated on where to reduce it. So we mentioned this last month. We did put it in special ed tuition, and as of right now, we're about $177,000 to the red. We will continue to monitor that. That number is fluid, so it does change throughout the year, bringing kids in or out of district. We'll have big swings on that, and an excess cost will have an impact on that as well. The good news is they have at least held that fund flat for yet another year. I think this is the 5th or 6th year in a row we've held excess cost flat. I don't know if that's good or bad news. It's just, it is what it is. Typically, it's about 70 cents on the dollar. Last year, I think it came in a little higher than that. There is some good news in the world of grants. ARP has an IDEA grant that is coming forward. There's some other grants out there that are starting to matriculate in that you're not seeing on the general fund side here. And if those come in, it'll help offset some of these costs. Travel.
Before you,
Yes, sir.
the payback, for lack of a better term, from the state on special ed thing, are we going to see a better rate? because they always tell us 100% and they give us less than 100%.
It hasn't been 100% in probably 7 or 8 years.
That's what I heard.
So they've capped a fund, and I think they capped it about 135 million. And so what they do at the state level is they said, okay, for all excess cost, so all outstate placements for all districts in the state, we're going to spend 135 million. So every district submits, they factor in the formula, and they say, okay, this is the allocation that you get. And it typically falls about 70, 72%. Last year was a little higher than historically, and I'm guessing that's because many districts weren't in school or maybe couldn't have paid for the outsourced placement, or kids weren't outplaced because those schools were closed. So the payback was much higher than it had been previously, but it's nowhere near 100%.
Right.
I think to be at 100%, you need to be at about 180 or 190 million at the state level, and the state has not done that. So that's a challenge. And remember, this is 4.5 times your average per student cost. So if it costs $20,000 for the average student in Seymour, the state will only reimburse you 70 cents on the dollar for anything above 90,000. So 4.5 times that cost. And then it's 70 cents on the dollar for every dollar spent. So if we outplace a student and it costs us 150,000, that's $60,000 we're going to get 70 cents on the dollar for. So we might get a check for 45,000. But the real cost of that student was $150,000. So the district's bearing a very large burden on that. So it's always in our best interest if we can provide the supports to educate them in district, which is always a challenge. So I know I kind of dove into special ed a little bit deep there, but that's a reality. That's why it's so fluid, and that's why that number can swing so quickly from time to time. So when we typically put together budgets in January and February and we adopt them in March, we might have a couple kids go either direction, in or out of district, before we actually even start the year. And that's, as a proportion of your budget, it's a pretty good size.
And that's why you need to budget for the unexpected.
Well, and that's the challenge part, right? So if you
hard.
over budget for it,
Right.
it gives the appearance that you're, padding your budget. But if you under budget for it, it gives the appearance of not being intelligent enough to budget appropriately. So it's really a difficult thing to budget for. The best thing you can do is just budget it what you know when you know it, and explain why things are changing.
I'm going to try, David, Jay and I have historically gone to the CAVE convention, and we'll go to the day before the actual convention when CAVE does make statements about what they want from the state, from the boards of education. And I tried a couple years ago to get something I got voted down, and that had to do with principal certification, but I may be bold enough this time to say that CAVE should come out with a statement saying that the Board of Education would appreciate you kicking in a little bit more than you've been kicking in.
And I think that's
Can't hurt.
no, it's a noble effort. I know that CAVE and CASBO and some of the other organizations have been lobbying on that for years. I was in the conference on Friday and met with the CFO and the Education Commissioner, and I'm pretty sure their response will be something to the effect of, you've just received a whole bunch of money in grants, figure it out. And they'll probably say it in a nice way, but that's my guess, but it is definitely a worthy cause because we historically haven't fully funded special education.
And it's been a national-wide problem.
100% agree. The last thing I wanted to mention on this is there is one other component that we haven't budgeted for appropriately, which is the solar costs of the system and the note payment on behalf of Board of Education. Now, I am pleased to share that we've made 2 payments, 2019-20 and 2020-21, for about $400,000 each year. We do owe another payment for this year. We are, obviously looking at the budget of where we could pull things out of and make part of that payment. Part of it may have to come from grants as well.
Where did we fund the last payments from?
Well, last year, part of it was funded off of year-end surplus. So if you recall, we froze a lot of stuff the last 2 months of the year, and we had a couple $100,000 surplus. So that was part of it. And it's because we were able to purchase some of our technology out of grants. And the other part of last year's came out of a payment in the most recent budget year. which is what we talked about at the last meeting. I said we've now fully funded that payment that was due before November, October 15th. We paid that about 6 weeks ago.
I'm really feeling like we need some documentation about all of this, because, you know, we wanted to wait, we wanted to have a new finance director in place, and then do, you know, an exploratory set of meetings to understand how and why this happened, but we just can't wait anymore. We really need to understand how this happened, why this happened, and, you know, I'm looking at two people who weren't here, two people who didn't have any authority over any of it or even involvement in it. So it's definitely going to be a case of fitting the puzzle back together.
Like
we
an,
can figure
like
it out.
an analysis of.
And I've talked to the town, and they have a bond schedule and a payment schedule associated with it over the next 17 or 18 years. I think the thing we've talked about it most, which is just making sure that we identify within our operating budget every year this funding piece. So it's something that we
I
can.
hear you, David. It's not on you. It's not an app. I mean, we've got to figure out who is going to own this responsibility of recreating for us and for the public what happened. Yeah, I think
The control side of it is also very important from a financial controls perspective of obligating to that much debt on an annual basis and having no record of it, no, you know what I mean? Like, there seems to be something missing from a financial controls perspective, in my opinion. So maybe we could just put that as a
Right.
part of the, when we put it back together, how we can prevent it from happening.
Like a chronological timeline.
Right.
When did it start? Da, 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 da.
Right.
exactly. And
We can figure that out.
What the process is to prevent it from happening in the future.
I can help you figure that out.
Yeah, and
Sure.
we talked about a budget timeline as well, just with everything.
Yep. So, and I'll try very hard to follow the traditional budget timeline here, kind of going forward.
Yeah.
But typically what will happen is that the budget will be created at the teacher and
We
administrator.
understand. It's
Okay.
okay. You don't have to go through
I'll
that.
put together a
We-
timeline.
we're all-
Yeah.
Yep.
We're all,
You're good on that?
yeah, we've been down the rodeo before.
First time?
Not exactly.
Medium. I hear you.
Yeah, but you're right though, because then you start to play the blame game.
Right.
Finance board, board of selectmen, board of education.
Yeah.
Play tennis, you hit the ball
Yeah.
back and forth.
And so like from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for either of you, all I know is that there was a miss and we handled it. Like,
Yeah, right.
or it was handled, even more passive, you know what I mean? But now I hear it should have been in this year's budget, it was never in this year's budget. They Board of Finance cut this year's budget even though it was missing a big line item that should have been there. So, we gotta figure out, like, who's,
It's a good point. That's
Yeah.
excellent
Sure.
clarification. You're right.
And we gotta stop the blame game.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
it
don't,
doesn't- yeah,
and
that- I
I'll be
don't think
honest,
so, yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
quite impressed with how this has not felt like a blame game.
Yeah.
Well,
But at the same time, we've got to find that balance between not being game blame, but between accountability so that it doesn't happen again.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think one of the things that, I'm really optimistic about is we've been having conversations not only about this, but about bigger projects too, like HVAC in Bungay and part of the high school. And the town has been absolutely willing to step up and put in quite a bit of money or obligate quite a bit of money for that. So, if we're able to get something like that accomplished, which I feel very confident we will.
And that's great, but I have no visibility into that at all. I don't know if conversations are happening, I don't know what's being discussed. Do you know it from a facilities perspective?
No.
No.
We just, we did have one meeting just discussing with ESSER funds and.
So,
with it too.
I don't know if this is a good time, but I can quickly bring everybody up
think
to
so.
speed on where we're at with that right now. So the most recent grant, the ART ESSER, the American Rescue Plan ESSER, which is the largest of the 4 grants that have come out thus far. And the way the grants were working, one was supposed to be kind of a stopgap to just kind of pay for PPE, and it was maintain. And the last grant is really meant for transforming education and doing things that you would not normally be able to do. And one of the things that many school districts have wanted to for a while that are really difficult to raise $3 or $4 million to do is things like HVAC.
Yes.
And included in HVAC is air quality controls and things like that, control systems. And these are things that for small towns can be 5-10 year projects, saving, or bonding and paying off for a long period of time. The ability of the art passer has allowed us to expedite that. And it's one of those projects where you're not going to have this, they call it the fiscal cliff. So if we took the $3 million, or in our case, $2 million for the art passer funds, and we bought a whole bunch of teachers, that's great. But in 2 years, what do when the funds dry up? You end up paying unemployment for a year, and now your level of service has just dropped way down. So it really makes a lot of sense to consider a big project like HVAC upgrades with those funds. So we did. We met with the town. We put together a small group and said, what do we think it's going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? How are we going to do it?
And there was no board involvement in that?
Well, we haven't brought anything forward yet. So really the next step is to put out a request for proposal, because we don't have that yet. We have preliminary ideas.
I know, I'm just gonna put it out there, but please step up. I know we're in finance committee, but this is one of those topics that spills over into so much, why are we not, how are we included in understanding?
No, that was the decision of the committee. Like, it wasn't even a committee, that was our next step.
It was the next step to involve the board and also with the
Yep.
town. It was just the very first initial meeting to look at the possibility of putting together an RFP, and both of the
Yep.
town representatives were very supportive in saying that the town and the amount of money, but they were also going by their bylaws and knowing that they had to do an RFP. Right, David, you want to just?
That's exactly right.
Yes.
So we looked
Yeah,
at,
they're just beginning discussion.
well, when we talked about the town, we're talking about the town finance director, we're
Yes.
talking about the town facilities manager, you're talking about your superintendent, assistant superintendent,
Are we
myself.
talking about the chairman of the board of finance?
Who is the
No.
chairman of the board of finance?
He wasn't there.
He wasn't.
No, there was just two representatives.
But if, and I don't want to put words in Doug's mouth, but I'm sure that conversation's happened.
Yes.
So,
Actually, the reason I ask is because I have a general belief that anything that the elected board of finance chairman is on, we should have elected board representation on as well, whether it's chairman of the full board or chairman of the subcommittee. So I hear what you're saying, preliminary conversations, but because of the miss that happened, I just think it's prudent to bring the board in sooner rather than later. Because this is exactly why we had the miss, because all of the conversations were happening, not including the board, so the board had no opportunity to know that we were supposed to be paying $400,000 a year. So
Yeah.
just definitely, I'm glad to hear that it was just a preliminary meeting, that next step was to bring this in.
Yeah, that was just
No,
a
I think that's fair.
one-time,
I mean,
just a
I've
beginning
been
meeting.
here almost 6 months, and I think, as soon as I found out about it,
Yeah.
whenever it was May or June, I brought it forward just to kind of have the conversation, and we've done our best to make it right, and not without conversations. Same type of thing with the,
Just to change the topic a little bit, but still stay within the grant funding, I think it would be nice to include like updates in our financial reports on the status of the grants. I know we did a survey back in August about the potential spending and just where are we. I think that would incorporate some of this, because I know HVAC for bucket was on that list along with some other things. So maybe we can see some kind of update on those types of funds that are outside the regular budget. We don't have any transparency in those, which is probably not helping track
David, don't you think the next step is having another meeting and going, like we said, we can, well, of course, involve the board chair and some other board representatives back with the
well,
town?
of course, I mean,
Yes,
again,
that'd be your next step. There was just a
again,
first initial
this is
discussion.
very preliminary at this point. We've submitted for the grant application. We've talked about where this could potentially come from. We've gotten some preliminary estimates. But before we move forward, we have to have a committee of some sort that involves elected officials from the
Yes.
town, the
And the
Board of
board.
Finance, the Board of Education, and honestly, we probably want some community input as well. And then when we move,
I'm sorry, help me understand, I lost track of what we're talking about.
I'm sorry, I'm still talking about the grants.
Right, okay, so that's what I think, just want to build on Ms. Mysteria. I mean, we've literally, as a board, been asking since March, and that's obviously, we've been asking since March, what is the plan for the grant money? We
Okay.
even have a letter from our board attorney that says the act is silent on who actually has the authority to make decisions with the money, and his opinion is the board should be the one to be able to say, yes, seal of approval, this is how we want to.
Which grant are you talking about specifically? Because we've had 4 that came in the last 6 months,
Whatever, any of them.
Okay. So he
including
can-
titles, or are we just talking?
ESSER,
No, we're talking about the COVID.
the maybe the ESSER grant
Okay, I
specifically.
just,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah, we're not talking about Title I.
Yeah.
We can get that clarity and bring it back to you.
Yeah, of course, and honestly, there's.
We did, we can
Yeah.
certainly reshare it, but I definitely did share it, but I can certainly absolutely reshare it. We haven't,
I feel like
spent-
we've seen lists of things, but we've never seen lists that have dollars attached to them, have we?
I think we shared via grant amounts.
yep.
Total of
So
each
I
grant.
broke it out, yep. I can send
Yeah.
it again, I broke it out.
We'll do that.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're approaching the top of the hour, so, does anyone have any other questions about the financial analysis summary ending September? And I just also want to just go off the top, we won't say anything, so, anybody have any other questions to direct to Dave? No? Okay. So, as a, go back to my agenda, too many things open. Long agenda, right agenda. Okay, so just as a, I entertain a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the financial management summary ending September 30th, 2021 as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. For our chairman's report, I just want to say that I want to apologize for any frustration that you feel in my tone, because I know you all feel it too. We are now 9 months in without a permanent full-time finance director, and we appreciate your services so much. But a lot of this is coming from that we don't have that
Permanent
one
person.
permanent, full-time. And we all know the situation that we're in, but that's where some of the frustration is coming from. So I just wanted to overtly apologize if it feels like it was personal directed to you. This is-
No, I don't feel that way at all. And honestly, between you and I wasn't expecting to be here in October. And I'm happy to help. But again, our firm is not really designed to stay in for extended periods of time. We're here to kind of find a stopgap until you find a permanent solution. So I'm happy to help where we can, and
Thank you.
trying to keep things moving.
And I think you've said, I'd just like to say, I think you've made some excellent points in regards of just kind of an overview and analysis of the grants. And the other thing, we'll come back about the ESSER situation and possibly with the next meeting, right, David?
Sure.
And Vonda will talk with the town representatives and see what we can do in regards about moving forward with this ESSER grant with the HVAC systems.
Terrific, thank you. We are wrapping up the Finance Committee meeting for the Board of Education. If there's any public comment specifically related to the Finance Committee. Going once for public comment?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Going twice for public comment? Does anyone have a public comment for the Finance Committee? One more time, public comment. Public comment period is closed. And I would entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved.
second.
Thank you. All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Thanks so much, everyone.
He's the surrogate.
Oh.
You need a pen? I got an extra one.
We'll keep it here.
All right. Ed, do you need a pen? You have a pen?
I have a pen.
You need one?
Good job, Ed.
Okay.
I listen sometimes.
Good job. Very proud of you.
And we have a lot of nice recognitions to do tonight.
Yeah. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Board of Ed of October 4th, 2021 to order. I would like to ask people to please stand so we can pledge to the flag which is behind you. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please remain standing, and I will turn it over to Mr. Stanley for a moment of silence.
Good evening. I'm going to remove my mask, otherwise you won't hear me. I'm asking for a moment of silence in memory of Bob Lang, and my voice shivers. It's because I saw so much of him. Bob Lang was an icon in our community, especially with regard to education, girls softball, and the annual Christmas parade. He was a 1959 graduate of Seymour High School and began his teaching career at the former Center School in 1964. A member of that first class, I was a member of that first class, along with Seymour Middle School teacher and girls softball coach, Harvey Kaplan. It was a great year. He was a great teacher, and Harvey and I reminisced about him over the weekend. Mr. Lang continued to teach 4th and 5th grade when the new Chapter School opened in the fall of 1965. He was a particularly strong math teacher. He was our Teacher of the Year in 1986 to 1987, and he was the first recipient of the John J. Gallagher Memorial Athletic Award in 2002. Mr. Lang left a legacy with regard to Seymour softball. I think everyone knows all of his accomplishments, and in my opinion, in my view, he is the father of our girls softball championships in Seymour, because he prepared the young ladies for the middle school and the high school teams through George J. Hummel Little League and Seymour tradition. He was president of the Christmas Parade Association and worked on that parade for 41 years until he decided to leave the committee a few years ago. This is a sad time for Seymour. Bob Lang was a gentle, kind, and humble man who contributed so much to our community. I'm going to miss him. I know the community is going to miss him, and all the many people that he touched. God bless you, Bob Lang. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first up is the a motion for the student representative. What is the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Garofalo.
I move to approve the recommendation of the high school administration and the student council to appoint Tyler Lang as the junior class Board of Ed student representative.
Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Mr. Champagne. Any discussion needed? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Tyler.
Yes.
Okay, I will go now to Karina, please, our senior representative, for a report.
So the student council is looking at some things. They posted a Google form with possible ideas for the class for
You have to speak much louder down there.
I'm so sorry.
Way louder.
So student council posted a Google form with possible ideas for the class rock, and officers are currently being voted on. And Spirit Week is scheduled for October 25th to the 29th, but the Spirit days have not been chosen yet. Mr. Bryant announced that starting soon the library will now be open every Thursday and Friday and every other Wednesday with the media specialist. Homecoming plans are up in the air because of the pandemic, but there are several ideas on how to have a safe and semi-rural homecoming, none of which have been finalized though. And some students are trying to plan the homecoming pep rally as a way to energize the students, but there have been no final decisions concerning it yet.
We are organizing a ticket basically that members of the community can buy that'll grant them access to both boys and girls soccer games, volleyball, and the 75th anniversary of Seymour football game during our homecoming week, which is the week of October 25th. That we're also trying to work it out with the Fathers Club Snack Shack that they can get some kind of concession at the game. And we're still working on a price board to get about $10 for the ticket. In terms of sports, our varsity sports have been off to a great start for the fall season. Our varsity football team is 3-0. This week there's a home game Friday night against Wolcott. Volleyball is undefeated 7-0. They have a home match tomorrow against Naugatuck. Our boys and girls soccer team were 3-4, and tonight we just heard that the girls soccer team won, advanced to 4-4. They play tonight at Torrington, and boys are playing tomorrow at Torrington. Our boys and girls cross country team, our boys are 5-3 right now, girls are 4-4. Our next meet is tomorrow in Watertown against Waterbury Career Academy, Crosby in Watertown. And lastly, girls swimming is 1-2, and they have a meet tomorrow at Woodley High School.
Questions for either of our representatives? Okay. All right, before moving to public comment, I was remiss not to ask us to introduce ourselves. I'll start with Mrs. Bruno, please.
Kristen Bruno, board member.
Beth Mysteria, board member.
Kristen Harmeling.
Chris Champagne. Fred Stanek.
Ed Stramello, board chair.
Peter Kubic. James Garofalo.
Leanne Doherty, board clerk.
Dr. Compton, school superintendent.
Bondaten's associate superintendent.
Dr. Chris Boyle, Director of Pupil Services for the district.
David Fiorello, interim business manager.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving to public comment. Public comment provides the opportunity for the public to make a comment. It is not a dialogue between the board and the public. Based upon what is heard during the public comment, the board may choose to add topics to the agenda. If questions are posed that the chairman is able to answer, those questions may be addressed under the chairman's comment portion of the agenda. The board will not discuss personnel matters. Comments should be respectful and no longer than 3 minutes in length, so that all who wish to comment may have the opportunity to do so. All public wanting to comment will need to state their name and address for the record prior to addressing the board. Does anyone from the public wish to comment? Step. You can go forward, sure. It'll make it, for those of us who can't hear very well, better.
Good evening. My name is Cengiz Efi. Cengiz is the first name, Efi is the last, from 26 Colony Street Extension in Seymour. I handed in some paperwork a few days ago to Mr. Elecna and Mrs. Roden for a exchange of words which allows the Seymour school system to open up their schools with no lawsuits, no masks, and no mandates. Mr. Elecna said that he would send it to central office. I'm still waiting to hear back. If the board has any questions on how to do their papers properly with all the encoding that's within the wording, they can contact me. I can show you how to do it. It'll only take a couple hours, if that. I can show you guys how to put the paperwork together, and you guys can reopen the schools the next day with no masks, no mandates, no vaccinations. All right? Thank you very much.
Anyone else on the public wishes to speak? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Hearing none, I close the public comment, and Dr. Compton, I apologize because I skipped you. Under C.
No, that's fine. Under recognitions, I would like for Mr. Floyd and for our board chair to present our 2 student representatives certificates for serving this year. I think it's very nice to recognize students. So, Mr. Floyd, you oversee this process of selecting these people. I know. Thank you. Yes, they are.
Do you think I could take a picture?
Yeah, we want a
with-
picture
with
with all 4 of you.
Man, do I feel small tonight?
Okay.
I don't know, I don't do
Yeah,
Facebook, but I heard.
Tyler, show your
down.
certificate.
When it's back up.
Need to get
Yeah.
Tyler here.
Thank you.
You can stand in front.
It's good.
Well, I know. Thank you.
Well, that's kind of. Thank you.
It's important to recognize our students.
Thank you very much. Nice job.
Okay, and now I have the pleasure of presenting the following to Mr. David Olekna in recognition of your outstanding achievement as recipient of the Dawn Hochsprung Outstanding Elementary School Principal 2021, Chapter of Varsity Elementary School. Mr. Olekna.
Thank you. I'm gonna zoom in, zoom. Thank you.
I guess I'm proud to say that I was your first mentor when you were the assistant principal here at the middle school. That is correct. Yeah. Thank you very
We
much.
thought because of during COVID, it was never officially at a board meeting, it was only done virtually, and we felt it was a great opportunity to really do this in person. Congratulations. I'm very proud of you.
And now I have the Seymour Teacher of the Year to Deidre Sponheimer. In recognition of your and it says, I touch the future I teach from Kristen McCall.
Wait,
Oh,
Yeah, we want a picture of the 2?
Dr. Collins, you should be here.
Okay.
Yes.
This
You got
is-
to hear her wonderful speech, so you definitely need to come.
This is something we'd like to see the board do annually. A lot of school boards recognize the teacher of the year. So we hope this will become a tradition here at Seymour, not just for convocation, but officially with the board.
Great.
I'd like to recognize that our Vice Chair, Mr. Jay Hatfield, is here. Jay works hard. Not that we all do.
Oh, she is here?
Oh, she is
Okay,
here?
our paraprofessional is here. Okay, we didn't, oh, that's great.
Okay, present this to Darlene Garcia, selection as the Seymour Paraprofessional of the Year for 21-22 school year. Shoulder to lean on, a voice to inspire, an ear to listen, a hand to hold, a heart to care. I'm a paraprofessional. Very much. Okay, I will turn it over now to Mr. Stanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask if Jamie Burns is here.
Jamie Burns is one of the movers in organizing the 75th anniversary of Wildcat football. And if I may allow Mr. Burns to speak for a few minutes to talk about the celebration that's planned for October 30th.
Sure. So, basically, come forward, Jamie.
Yeah, so
please.
basically, it's the 75th anniversary. I know the timetable isn't right because we didn't have a season in Connecticut last year. So I moved it to this summer fall. It's going to be Saturday, October the 30th. I think this young man mentioned it before. It's been 18 months in the making, so to speak. I started a Facebook page April 1st, and pretty much covers all 75 seasons. I mean, a little bit more here or less. We don't have video from the 40s and the 50s. I don't have a clip of Mark Allen throwing a touchdown. But we covered all. It's been on the page, Seymour Wildcat Football, and that day, obviously it's going to be on the Barber Field. It's the day of the Career Academy game. I think 10 a.m. is when the premises hopefully is going to be open. We're going to have people come. I talked to Paul Sponheimer, and he says he's talked to some people, and he said that he wants to have the people go to the athletic wing of the Hall of Fame. The game kicks off at 12, I already mentioned that. And we have alumni coming from all over the country. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to be there. I really can't put a number on it. If you send out a Facebook invitation, you get 10 people, whether there's going to be 100 there or 1,000. So that's just the way those things work. I would imagine, I know guys are coming from Florida, California, so if you live in Seymour, I really think, unless you have a wedding, which, I know how inconvenient those could be in the fall, you got to make it. So we're hoping to get 250, 400 additional people to the crowd that we're going to have. We're going to celebrate the players by the decade at halftime. I don't know how much you guys know about Seymour football from the beginning to the end, but 75 years, 3/4 of a century, it's a long time. If you compare it to Ansonia and Naugatuck, it's not, but compared to the rest of the world, it is. So hoping that, really appreciate Fred and all his help, all you guys could do. Hoping we could get the win that day. Career Academy's 3-1, so it looks like a scheduling faux pas, but worried about Woken this week, and hopefully everybody can get out there that's alive. And I'm hearing rumors a guy from the 46 team is going to, be willing to do the coin toss. So at 93 years old, if he can flip the coin, I hope our kids at 17 can win the game. All right? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to introduce a resolution for adoption, hopefully by the Board of Education. Resolution celebrating the 75th anniversary of Seymour Wildcat football. Whereas Seymour High School Wildcat football began 75 years ago, and whereas Seymour High School's football teams, cheerleaders, dance team members, majorettes, and band members have excelled in play, competition, and support of Wildcat football over the past 75 years. And whereas the participants during said time deserve to be honored and recognized for their contributions, talents, and their dedication to Seymour Wildcat football, and for instilling Seymour pride in our entire community. And whereas the Seymour Board of Education is proud to recognize the contributions of the Seymour Wildcat football players, cheerleaders, dance team members, majorettes, and band members to the Seymour Public Schools and the entire community. And whereas the members of the Seymour Board of Education wish to join in the celebration by honoring all the participants involved with Seymour High School Wildcat football over the last 8 decades at the October 30, 2021 75th anniversary celebration of Seymour Wildcat football during the Seymour High School versus Waterbury Career Academy High School football game at the Barber Field. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the Seymour Board of Education, hereby recognize and honor the players, cheerleaders, dance team members, majorettes, and band members who have participated in Seymour Wildcat football since its inception 75 years ago. And I would ask that that resolution be adopted by the board. I'll make a motion that the Board of Education adopt the resolution as read.
Second.
Second by Ms. Harmon. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 9-0.
And I would like to thank Ms. Dory for preparing a nicely drafted, well, not drafted the resolution, but nicely presented resolution we'll present to the group that's organizing and to the high school on the 30th.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, next item agenda is the consent agenda. What is the board's pleasure?
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
seconded by Mr. Kubik. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Chair counts 9, abstentions, see none, carries 9-0. Okay. Next item is item 7A, the new position, substitute school security officer. What is the board's pleasure?
I move that we approve the recommendation of Superintendent Dr. Susan Thompson and Associate Superintendent Ron Lorenza to add the position of substitute school security officer on an as-needed basis.
Seconded by Mr. Champagne. Any discussion? Question? Discussion. Okay. Yes.
The superintendent provide some background on this substitute position?
Okay, in regards to, this mainly is for coverage of football games and football games only. And I sent an email what the exact cost would be with the overtime and the time from like 6 in the evening till about 9:45, 6:30 to 9:45. But just based upon the police and Mr. Curran's recommendation, felt like that, and Mr. Floyd as well, that we needed a little bit more coverage because there was really a large attendance at the last meeting, football game, excuse me, and there also was a fight at the end of the game. So we'd just like to do it only for football, or as needed.
Mrs. Tenzer?
Just to add to that, the other small as-needed basis would be on the rare occasion that now that our security officers do have personal time,
Right.
if 2 of them took the same day, it would allow us to call in not just anybody, but one of the people that has recently retired from us.
So clarification.
Anyone else have questions on that? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hands again. Opposed? Abstention. Motion passes again 9-0.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the request of teacher David Willardson to reinstate the close-up field trip to Washington, D.C. on April 10th through 15th, 2022.
Second by Mr. Hatfield, motion by Ms. Harmon. Any discussion? Anybody have questions? The form was provided, obviously, with all of the necessary data.
Fingers crossed that it can happen, and thank you to Mr. Willardson.
Okay, no questions? All those in favor, signify by raising your hands. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? 9-0, moving right along.
Actually, C was a part of kind of with A, but
We
it's
lumped
really
it
a
together.
separate motion on the football versus just the substitute security officer.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about
We
that.
have a motion here. The other motion was to hire a substitute. This is a motion to, as a need basis. What is the board's pleasure?
Make a motion to authorize the superintendent of schools to approve on an as-needed basis the use of the school security officers and security officers.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay. I had one question of follow-up on this. I did see in our emails that were communicated to us that there was also going to be an increase in the police officer count. Now, that is not what we're voting on. We're voting strictly on
On the schools.
our people.
On our people, yes.
On our people. So everybody understands that, because during that discussion that was provided, there was also a
Yeah,
request
right.
by a director of security to add another police officer. And I do remember that that usually is done by the athletic director, not by the director of security. I'm sure there's communication between the director of security and the athletic director, but that request is usually done by the athletic director, so everybody knows that we're talking about something different here.
Right.
clear on that? Okay, any other questions? Okay, yes.
So, I guess from what I understand, right, we have 3 police officers that play that monitor the games. Currently 3 officers we hire for each game. So is the intent to increase the number of police officers in addition to the SSOs? Or are we eliminating the police officers and bringing in the SSOs? Because I saw your salary comparison.
Right, I was just giving you all the information.
And although I believe it's safety is paramount.
Right, Mr. Floyd, would you
Is
just,
it necessary to have?
this is just with the
4
school
or 5, 6
security
police
officers. In regards about the police officers, I can't answer the exact number of what's needed for the police officers. This was,
So it's my understanding, the athletic director and the director of security work out individual game details. There are some, I don't know if you've been paying attention to anything in the news relevant to football games this year. But pretty much across the street, there's been increased fights, for lack of a better word, and being actually the most notable one, where people were going to the games with specific intent of fighting each other. So rather, in our first football game this year, as I'm aware you were there was a fight, and that's very unusual for Seymour. I believe that's the first fight that I could recall happening in a football game. So this is a proactive move, to hopefully, have a presence there for some games are more, concerning than others. But the idea of having an extra police officer there, an extra security, is to, show force, more or less, to deter any concept of violent or inappropriate behavior.
Now, my question to that would be, I'm hoping that the police officers will be dispersed around the field.
My understanding is they are dispersed around the field, up in the back line of the stadium, the seating. We normally have a couple, 2 by the ticket collecting main gate. But again, throughout the game, we need to have them circulating around.
it's like crowd.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
So once again, is the intent to increase by a police officer and 1 or 2 SSOs, or what
It's
is
my
it?
understanding that there's certain games, not all games, but at certain games, we would need to have the ability to increase the number of police officers as well as having SSOs present as well. It may not be all the games, but there's certain games that we would pay closer attention to.
And the intent is not to eliminate the police officers and replace them with the
I don't
SSOs?
think we
No,
can.
absolutely
They
not.
don't have arrest authority.
No.
We need to have arrest
That's what I'm asking, because I saw the salary comparison that you had sent out, so I didn't know if there was.
No, absolutely not. The police officers still have to be there. This was just because of crowd control and monitoring. They felt like that they needed extra based upon Mr. Curran's and speaking with the athletic director, Mr. Freud, that they needed more coverage as well because of just,
We want to provide a safe environment for our kids and our families to attend.
Absolutely.
Is really what it comes down to. And, I think right now, and again, you start looking at what's happening in other towns, other football games, other athletic events, the real challenge we have right now is that, the behavior of people. So knowing that, and recognizing it now, we're trying to be proactive so we can continue to provide a safe environment for our families and our children and our students to go to enjoy a football game without, fear.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you're right, and I've noticed that Cheshire and I forget the other school, there was an incident with the flag of Israel that got into inappropriate comments by students against it, because it was a blue and white or blue, red, or white flag, and the Israel flag was there, and there was comments with the superintendents to speak to students. So there's an increase in inappropriate behavior, for lack of a better term.
so we're trying to be proactive.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Okay, so any other questions?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendation of the Curriculum and Technology Committee to change the
Wait a
number.
minute,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we didn't vote on the other one, Chris.
Oh, my apologies.
That's okay.
I'm
Sorry
That's
sorry
okay.
about that.
No. Okay, All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That was to authorize the superintendent to approve on an as-needed basis the use of Social Security, school security officers as security to Seymour High School home football games. Anybody opposed? Abstention. Passes unanimously. Moving along. Ms. Harmon.
Item D. I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendation of the Curriculum and Technology Committee to change the number of math credits required for graduation from 3 to 4 credits to align with Connecticut State recommended flexibilities.
Correction from 4 to 3.
Sorry, from 4 to 3 as it's stated under W. Thank you.
Okay, second to that motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay, Mr. Garofalo seconds it. Any discussion? Anybody have any questions for the technology committee members who are all present today? On this? Anybody?
So I read the attachment and it had different credit numbers on it, and so I didn't know if I read it wrong, but if someone could kind of explain the background of this and what other things that are used to measure, I think is what I got out of it in terms of apprehension of math versus just the credit number, right?
Okay, Dr. Coffey, you like Mr. Floyd to do that?
Yeah, Mr. Lucky, do you want to, and Mr. Freud? Let's talk about.
Graduation requirements,
Yes.
there's that particular change. The state for a moment had made the state recommendation to have the number of math credits required for graduation to be 4. They then changed that standing and they decided that it would be in the best interest of the students in the state of Connecticut to be offered a variety of pathways. So in doing so, they're trying to create a little bit more flexibility. So the actual number of credits to graduate from Seymour High School won't change. Right now it's 26, it will stay 26. What that does is a student might have be more interested in attending the science classes or taking technology classes. Now they could use, only take 3 math classes and take an extra one of those other classes. They still have 9 credits of what we call STEM classes. That hasn't changed either. So the requirement was 4 credits math, 2 credits STEM, they did 3 credits science. So right now we're going 3 credits math, 3 credits science, 3 credits STEM to give it more flexibility to diverse their, more diversified experience for the students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
If I may, but does flexibility really mean that we're teaching all the fundamentals of the 4 math courses that we required and worked hard to increase that math curriculum over the past years? Does that really mean that we're going to have a better curriculum?
We are trying to improve our instructional courses and curriculum, Mr. Stanek. In particular, we're focusing on foundations of the heart of algebra, actually, and foundations of advanced math, which are tied to the SAT student performance, which is, you're familiar with the SAT. So some of the adjustments that we're making to our math classes, which you'll hear about shortly, are designed to help improve in our SAT performance in those areas, as well as provide students a little bit more flexibility when taking math. Not everybody is mathematically minded, and some people have struggled with it. So we have to be careful not to quickly move them up to the advanced courses before we cultivate a firm understanding of the algebraic concepts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for either of our administrators or Dr. Thompson concerning this? Yes.
It's not actually, I would just ask if we could please put this link that we all have access to, can we actually make that part of the physical agenda or minutes when it gets posted for parents? That would be great. Thanks. And we might actually do that as a regular course, but I don't think that we do. But that piece of background information would be great to make sure it's in the minutes with the links. Thank you.
Show the transparency as well.
Yeah.
That's
And
good.
people can, I would imagine that as you know, as kids start coming home and telling their parents, I don't have to take math this year, parents don't want to see it.
Clarify the flexibility
Yeah.
with STEM.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor again, signify by raising your hand. Opposed? I see 2 opposed. Any abstentions? Motion passes 7-2.
You could tell I'm the dinosaur in the room.
I was waiting for you to say that, Mr. Chairman. Okay. F,
E, I think we need E.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So E is Program of Studies, 2021-2022 new course offering. At this time, the Curriculum and Technology Committee would like to make a motion to approve the new courses at the high school Program of Studies for Algebra 1 and Algebra 1B. That diverges a little bit from the recommended motion on the agenda, but it is still under the item E, Program of Studies. So we're only prepared to recommend two courses of study, Algebra 1A and Algebra 1B.
Okay, does everybody understand the motion by Ms. Harmon? Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Bruno. Any discussion? Yes.
Are we splitting them up into 2 years?
Yes.
Or-
Yes, that is the intent, to take Algebra 1, that curriculum, and split it into 2 years. Absolutely not for all students. For the students who it is deemed to be beneficial to them, to really help them get the full foundation of algebra. Allowing them the opportunity to spread that over 2 years, to go more in depth and at a pace that is more suited to their needs. And again, it would not be for all students taking Algebra 1.
Any other questions? Chris, you fine? Okay, hearing none. Everybody's clear on the motion now. It's just the Algebra 1A and Algebra 1B. All those in favor, signify by raising your hand, please. Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Okay, moving along now to F. Thank you, Ms. Harmon.
So for F, it's on the agenda under discussion and possible action. So the discussion part can hold, but the action part, again, the board, the technology, and the Curriculum and Technology Committee is not prepared to make a motion or recommend a motion on this agenda item.
Okay.
Would just like to clarify too, under F, that the situation with the Griffin Hospital initiative, that's something that Fred Stanek has been leading the charge, and that there'll be a meeting on October the 12th with the president and the CEO as the possibility of a allied health initiative. So we're going to bring more back, as we discussed in the education.
Wonderful. Really looking forward to hearing about that.
What we're talking about is Griffin Hospital has a school health careers, and they have in the past cooperated with Ansonia High School to bring that curriculum into the high school to teach med techs, phlebotomy, and LPN, the licensed practical nurses. And this is a wonderful program where students can finish high school and as a phlebotomist take a $40,000 a year job. So I've asked to explore this possibility for Seymour High School.
Okay, moving along to the next motion. Again, from the Curriculum and Technology Committee. Ms. Arnold.
I'd like to accept the recommendation of the Curriculum and Technology Committee to adopt United States history, advanced placement, and United States government and politics textbooks as documented in the textbook request form.
Second motion.
Okay.
I'll yield to Mr.
No, either way.
I'll yield.
Still you. Okay. You know, I've always thought it's important to recognize people when they do a fine job. The form that I saw when they attended that committee for this was done as well as I've ever seen a form done, and I want to congratulate, I think that was Mr. Wilkinson, correct? Mr. Form?
Correct.
Okay. He deserved it. We used to have a little bit of a issue with the form in previous years. A great improvement, and I'm pleased with that. Anyone else have a question? Okay. All in favor signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes 9-0.
Mr. Sedano?
Yes,
Who seconded that?
Mr. Kubik. And I've been remiss, I see them sitting over here, and I apologize to our first select woman, Mrs. Dragones, and our state representative, Mrs. Nicole Claridis Petria. Welcome. Okay, moving on to committee reports. Finance Committee, Mrs. Hamlin.
We did a fairly standard review of where we are in the year. This meeting, we did have a different view of an all-up line item, which synthesized down that detailed report. We're still working on a few things to get the encumbrances column right to load, but we are tracking, maybe not like we want to be in every individual line item, but we are tracking where we are in our budget process, and there are things we will continue to look at. They are the typical suspects as they are every year, tracking on medical expenses, tracking on special education, tuition expenses, etc. We also talked about the need to really press forward and try to understand our obligations in terms of the solar energy project. There was definitely a bit of a gap that we had when we first undertook the project between understanding the full financial obligation that we had. And so I look forward to working with the first select women and finance folks on the town side to really understand how the miss happened in order to prevent another miss like this from happening again. And when I talk about miss, I don't want anyone to think we're not paying for what we need to, because we are. It's just that we had a little bit of a blind spot on the board in terms of what our obligation were. And we want to make sure that that does not happen in the future, because we can all anticipate having projects that are like this, with collaboration between the town and the board, particularly when it comes to sustainability and energy saving measures. So happy to entertain any questions from board members in terms of what we're doing on the finance committee.
Any questions? Okay, moving along to Niacc's 5-year report, Mr. Freund.
Yes, in September, we received our feedback from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, Commission on Public Schools, on our 5-year report filed last year. Within their document, they gave us 15 commendations. Great strides in curriculum development, developing schedule, gives teachers an opportunity to meet. I'm not going to go through all the commendations. They also said that school officials, namely me, the principal, are requested or to submit a special
progress report due May 1st, 2022, describing action taken to complete the highlighted recommendations listed below. 1, provide a full-time licensed media specialist to see so the library space can be more active learning environment. And 2, provide the necessary funds for an alternative education program that can service the needs of both the regular and special education students. In this document, they also indicate that our year of evaluation was pushed back a year from 2026 to 2027 because of COVID. At the end, they said that the school is currently on warning status. And they'll say they review the warning status will be reviewed when the commission considers a special progress report. So after we give them feedback on those 2 areas that we still have to work on.
Questions for Mr. Freund?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Immediately after the evaluation, we were not on warning status. We were placed on warning status when the media
specialist position was eliminated. And now we're trying to get off of warning status again.
Now, the alternative program stuff there, would that put us in a warning process if we did not develop that?
I believe they're saying that they want
I'd like to see one.
What was that?
I think that's important to just say that they're emphasizing it would be important to have some type of alternative education program. And next month, we're going to come back with a presentation just to start discussing some ideas about that. I just thought it was good for the Board of Ed this evening to just understand They definitely did a good job and a good progress report, but it's just important when it deals with student achievement that the Board of Ed knows what's going on with the accreditation process. So thank you, Mr. Floyd and the high school administration and Ms. Tenza for the work that went into this.
Now, if we looked into the possibility of collaborating on an alternative program with the Valley towns.
We already have, actually. We've communicated with all the Valley towns and visited their alternative education program. Over the years, probably the last 8 to 10 years, if not more, we've been trying to develop an alternative education program for Seymour High School. And in doing so, we've had the opportunity to talk with these schools, see what they're doing, get their ideas. Mr. Lucky was spearheading a lot of that work.
Okay, but are you saying, let me finish. Are we saying that when we reached out, that we got like a no from the local towns, or
They're not accepting. Ansonia used to take students.
Right.
They stopped taking students. Oxford doesn't take students. Derby doesn't take students. Shelton used to take students, and they stopped doing that as well.
Okay. So they're not cooperating. Go ahead. Kristen and then Beth.
So my question is, I hear what you're saying, they're not taking students, but are they open to a collaborative program where maybe we specialize in some areas, they specialize in some areas? Because, I mean, I would want to just send our kids to another district, but to put something together collaboratively is different than that.
The challenges with that is the location. Ideally, students having an alternative education program isn't a life sentence. Students should be able to move into it at times of need and move back into the general education program as needed. If you start creating a collaborative effort where you have a school off grounds someplace else, it's more difficult for them to transition back to our regular education program, where if it's contained in our building during the school day, it gives us much more flexibility in working with our kids than needed.
And most of the successful alternative education programs are done within the school, in their own specific program.
So I was showing my age, an alternative high school, and I'm in high school midnight school, so, okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't do that.
Well, there is a high school, there's Shelton Valley,
Mhm.
students could choose to go to.
But starting
At a
this,
certain age.
this January, that age turns to 18.
So it's a high school experience, but it's for adults only?
Well, they get a high school diploma by going to the.
So, yeah, no, not the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, Beth?
I'm good.
Okay, anyone else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Freund, alternative education, does that by any stretch of the imagination include, let's say, a gifted program?
I think gifted programs are more closely associated with special education programs. Within the existing school, you provide a special course of study for the gifted students, much the same way you would do for a student who's challenged, educationally wise. An alternative education is a program that's designed to give students who, let's say, just aren't doing well in a traditional education setting, gives them the opportunity to perform, earn their graduation requirements, have counseling staff talk about careers, colleges, universities afterwards. So gifted, talented, gifted is something different.
Mainly a credit recovery type of program to help them graduate and make them be successful.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Beth?
So you mentioned you've been working on this program for the last 8 or 9 years. What's been the biggest hurdle to implementing something?
Getting it to the board, the superintendents did want to bring it forward to the board.
So you had a good discussion with first week when I came about the need.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Thorne? Yes.
Just a clarifying question. Dr. Compton, did you say we would have more information about this at our next board meeting?
Yes, absolutely. We've actually been working on a proposal. Again, this was something that transpired during my first week when I went in and had a sit-down talk about the programs and needs. And one of the things that we talked about was alternative ed. We also talked about the algebra issue. I talked about AP. we talked about special ed, so it was a collection of a lot of items, but I think I was one of the very few superintendents that, you know, that really wanted to focus on alternative ed as well as looking at those kids that are in the lower quartile, as well as also on the AP in the upper end and a possible associate degree as well. So we did a lot of talking, right, Mr. Lucky, Mr. Floyd? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Swan before we move on to the next? Okay, Mr. Lucky, you are a high school manufacturing proposal.
So if you check your emails, you should have got a document from me sharing this proposal. If you want to, your own leisure, have it on your computers. Otherwise, Mr. Floyd to assist me from the other end there with the proposal. This proposal is coming primarily from myself, something I've been thinking about, as well as in conjunction with Mr. David Tuttle, who is a former grad of Seymour High School and a Seymour resident. He's currently teaching at Flat Tech and has done so for many, many years. He's actually helped us probably for the last 6 or 7 years when we need precision parts for our alternative energy vehicle that we can't produce in-house. Sometimes we send him the CAD files, and he'll work on those and get us those precision parts for our car that we race the line on. I've also been to several different professional development sessions. Mr. Tuttle, the most recent was this summer, 2 days at Southern Connecticut State University. It was a manufacturing symposium, both with manufacturers, state reps, state senators, and many manufacturers there, and SCSU staff was there, and that's primarily where we really got into this conversation, David and I, that 2-day retreat this summer, talking about manufacturing. So right now, the state of Connecticut.
I was just wondering if there's a way to make that visible for on-screen viewing. I don't know if it's able to be seen now. Can it come up a little bit and maybe board members slide to the side, or is it not going to pick up? Mr. Martin? I don't want to overstep, Mr. Chairman, but I think it would be great if there's a way to make it visible.
Okay, so what is their suggestion?
Can't really move it.
That can move up a little bit.
I think it's up at its maximum height. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, that's at its max.
Better? Thank you, I appreciate
We
it.
have a pop-up there, Mr. Brown. That's great.
You have a pop.
Take
Yep,
that
your
down.
screen.
There we go. So in the state of Connecticut, we have a supply and demand problem, primarily in manufacturing. Right now, there's 20 different high school, state system schools for technical education, of which they turn away typically 6,000 to 10,000 students a year in the state of Connecticut. So that's your MS, that's your Platinum, Ryan, and Canaan Techs across the state. So what ends up happening is these kids end up coming back to their comprehensive high schools. Well, most of them don't want to be in a comprehensive high school. They want to be in a hands-on type of environment. 15 of our 20 schools in the state of Connecticut for technical education have a manufacturing certificate program. And from the 2 different resources I spoke to, they typically graduate about 20 seniors a year. So you got about 300 kids graduating with a manufacturing certificate from our technology high schools in the state of Connecticut. Simultaneously, over the last 10 to 12 years, the state of Connecticut has been putting $20 to $50 million into some of our community colleges. 10 of the 12 community colleges also have these advanced manufacturing certificate programs similar to the high schools. It usually takes a typical graduate about a year to do that. They attain about 30 to 32 credits. And about 30 students graduate from each one of those per year. So you're looking at 600 total graduates in the state of Connecticut to meet the need of the manufacturers in higher-end precision manufacturing. The state university system plans to have 95% job placement. The 2 resources that I have in our tech ed system say it's about the same. So kids in high school that are going to Platter that are in these programs, sometimes are getting employed months before they graduate with guaranteed employment. So a typical job search, if you're just to go on and Google, you're going to find that there's hundreds and sometimes thousands of unfilled manufacturing jobs. One of the other big issues in the state of Connecticut is we have an aging workforce. So there's a manufacturing article or report there, you can read at your own leisure, but we're about one of the oldest states by average age of manufacturers. And from manufacturers I've spoken to, both in the summer and I know personally, it takes them months sometimes to find people that are qualified to get into some of these higher end positions. And you know, we really need to start doing a better job, I think, at comprehensive high school in order to give these kids all the skills they need to get right out of high school and be employed, because not every kid is going to go to college. And therefore, not every kid is getting into the tech ed schools. So our comprehensive high schools, I think, have an obligation to students who want to be hands-on learners and providing them with particular programs. So there's different pathways that Dave and I discussed, and he helped me create this PowerPoint. And any one of these deals with precision manufacturing, from medical, aerospace, defense, automotive, and so on. Next one, Mr. Quinn. So we have this skilled workforce, and we suffer shortages, as I said. The salary is a pretty important aspect of the state of Connecticut. We have one of the highest sets of salaries in the 4 different areas that we're going to be proposing here across the nation, not just New England, across the nation. So where can people start? They can start at any one of these 4 different areas. We talk about people going to college for engineering. We have metrology, which is the study of measurement. Cnc machining is one of the ones that we would really focus on, and tool making, if we were to have this program at Seymour. So importance, if you take a look at that average salary, we have our CNC operators, $72,930. Machinists, $52,000. Tool and die, $68,000 almost. Mechanical engineers, close to $100,000. And we need to be able to provide these pathways for our students coming out of high school to get into some of these jobs in a meaningful way. So they can start pretty much anywhere. The biggest things that we would be teaching if we do get this program is the CNC machining and tool making. They would definitely be learning engineering and metrology for sure in the program. So engineering is the big one. I mean, typically that is more of the 4-year degree, but some of the tech schools do have students that are not going immediately to the workforce. They are going out to college to do this, or they're doing it simultaneously while they're working. So generally, in our math courses, we try to teach as much as we can hands-on, but it's not the same as the engineering process. We currently do a pretty good job of that right now in our CAD programs, but it's all done in 3 dimensions, and it's all done on a computer. We really want to get the kids to touch and feel and create. So again, we need more hands-on concepts to be able to do in the building outside of what we currently have. The next part would be the CNC machining. So typically, in the past, all the machining was done by hand, and hand measurements. We've moved on to the computer age, in which we have the computer numerically controlled machines, in which kids are programming now the subtractive manufacturing parameters, and then loading of material in the machine via their programming will take away the material it doesn't need to give us that precision point. Next one, so the tolerances are kind of super small with the CNC machining, and it happens a lot faster, obviously, than what we used to typically do when we did it by hand. Next one. Another subset of this proposal will be the tool making. And so the tool makers are specialty areas in the precision manufacturing field, and obviously they're looking to make tools and molds and other things that we use in all kinds of common components in our cars and our daily lives. Again, tolerances are extremely small. The last part of this is the precision inspection and metrology. So all these manufacturers, when they're creating these precision parts, the parts that go into our cars and our airplanes and other mechanical devices, they can't just create it and send it out. There are these tolerances that need to be measured, and that's where the specialist metrologists will come in and put together the reports to make sure that these are all made in such a precision fashion that we can fly that airplane and drive that car. And that's that certificate. So Connecticut, as I said, has put a lot of money over the last 10 to 12 years into manufacturing. So I don't know if you can click on that guy. You just scroll down a little for me. Nasty a lot now. So I just want to take a look at a couple of the stats a little bit more. So you see that 19.7 billion right there, right in the middle? That's what we brought in the state this year for manufacturing in the state of Connecticut. $19.7 billion in defense contracts came into the state and were done in our manufacturing facilities. Scroll down a little bit more of those. You see the airplane on the right says a big 92%. 92% of our exports came from our manufacturers. So it's a huge chunk of what we do in this state. We've been known for this for a very long time. But we have that aging workforce, and we can't meet the demand via the supply of education. I don't know if somebody can pop back to presentation or just come back and click on that tab on the top for me. Next one. What I'm going to do is just go through one of these. You can look at this at your own leisure, but there's specific data that I pulled from the, if you want to click on the top one. And we're going to have to do a little scrolling down here. So this is looking at CNC machinists. And when you look at this data, the darker the green on this one here, the darker the green shows how many employment opportunities are there. And for a very small state, you can see that we're pretty dark green. Scroll down more than this. When we're looking at the red, that's your location quotient, so that's your density, like how many jobs there are per people in the state. And again, we're very dark red, which represents a high level number of jobs per people that exist in the state. Scroll down. And then the blue is the average mean wage. And the darker the blue, the higher the pay. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. And if you notice right there, we come in for CNC manufacturing, 4th in the United States for pay. I believe my eyes are going as I get a little bit older. I believe it's in the high 70,000s for CNC manufacturers. That's the certificate that these kids are walking out of Platt Tech with. We're going to that 1-year program. And they're walking out at average wage, probably after 2 or 3 years because of our aging workforce, high 70,000. Scroll down a little more. So when you look at the green here, the darker the green, the more employment. You can see in our little state, there's pretty dark green over there. Keep scrolling down. Again, the location quotient. So this looks at metropolitan areas, and there's a lot of dark red, which means there's a lot of areas. But you're going to scroll down and stop on the next set of data. And if you notice in there, we have Waterbury, Connecticut is in the top 10 in the United States for demand per capita, meaning for how many people actually exist in that area. Scroll down a little more, Mr. Point. And again, here's your average mean wage. And you look, in Connecticut, very dark blue, meaning the wage is very high. Scroll down. And this is going to look at two different, here's your top 10 list, stop right there. And your top 10 list in the whole United States is 2 metropolitan areas that are from Connecticut here. So we rank both in our Hartford area and down on the shoreline, in the top 10 in 2 different metropolitan areas for CNC operators as far as wages concerned in the whole United States. I'm not going to go into the other lists, so please go back to the PowerPoint, Mr. Freund, because when you look at them, you're going to see the same thing. So the other links are machinists, tool dyeing engineers. They're going to reflect exactly what you just saw on CNC if you take the time on your own to take a look at that. Go to the next slide, Mr. Freund. Right there. So, job outlook, you did a quick search for it. It's going to tell you that we're looking to grow at CNC specifically by 23% by the year 2024 from right now. That's how much it's going to grow for CNC machinists. Go ahead, Mr. Freund. So how does it fit into the comprehensive high school? I mean, that's what everybody's wondering. Okay, so you're giving me this program, what does it mean? What does it mean to all the kids? Well, it's in all of our standards. You go to the Common Core State Standards, which is a link there for you. All of these math and some English ones and technical reading and writing, it's all in our standards. So it's only going to bolster our standards for these kids who may not have a hook to do really well in school. Because remember, these might be the kids that wanted to go to Platt, or Emmett, and they couldn't get in because they're one of that 10,000 that couldn't get in. So now they're with us. So how do we hook them? We got to hook them with something that they got to do hands-on, because that's why they wanted to go to those other schools. It's the point. So also in our NGSS standards, new science standards, there's a whole engineering theme. So if you take a look at those, it's going to talk definitively about the engineering standards. Again, that's what this program will bring. So for the next one. Common Core even went so far as writing a separate document called Bridging the Divide. And Bridging the Divide talks about technical education and how the real-world hands-on application of technological education helps the common student in the classroom. All right, next one. So there is a price. Of course, there always is. In talking with Mr. Tuttle, who's been doing this for his entire life, this is the price that he came up with to start a CNC program at Seymour High School. We include the following things that are listed there, from CNC machining centers to lathes, mills, measuring devices, tools, and whatnot. Talking to Mr. Tuttle, he does believe that there are grant opportunities out there. We haven't gotten that in depth with it yet for some of this equipment, if not most of it. Next slide. So the facilities, wondering, hey, where's it going to go? There's 3 different areas of the high school we identified as possibilities. For some of you, you might remember we used to have, actually, we were the last comprehensive high school in the state of Connecticut to have a machine shop. So we still have that room that's currently being used for our construction systems course, which I really don't want to see go, but we do have 2 other areas for a possible manufacturing facility. So for the next one. We would be also asking for 1 additional technology education teacher. So there are some returns, obviously. We're getting those kids interested in some hands-on components, some career paths in which they could make a lot of money coming right out of high school. The funding, there is funding that comes and goes, I believe, with kids. I could be wrong on that aspect. One of the biggest things that Mr. Tuttle has been provided with all the resources and all of his contacts is the advisory team. So he has that 95% or so job placement of his advisory team down there. They would be our advisory team. They're going to come to us. They're going to come help our kids. They're going to come in our classrooms. They're going to spend their time with our kids. They're going to get them jobs immediately upon graduation, if not before they graduate. Next one is. So Mr. Tuttle wanted to be here tonight, but he's actually teaching at Housatonic Community College also. He teaches on Mondays and Wednesdays. So he does send this message with him, and he is more than willing to meet with each and every one of you at your leisure. Mr. Tuttle wrote, "My technical education Seymour school system, was grades 7 through 12, inspired me and resulted in an extensive career within manufacturing. I was able to enjoy a safe and secure living for my family and to build my house in my hometown twice. All this was funded upon the shoulders of the strong teachers and parents who instilled the value of hard work, dedication, and the blessing of the technical skills and knowledge. My education resulted in a 16-year career in aerospace and currently in my 23rd year as an educator and the department head and curriculum writer for the CTEX and the CCCS. My hope is to see the Seymour school system return to providing these types of opportunities for their students, just as it had for me. Every school system has students who are not athletes or academically motivated. These students deserve a place to belong and my career opportunities as well. Careers in the Connecticut precision manufacturing industry will inspire and employ the next generation of engineers, skilled workforce, parents, and citizens in Seymour. He's going to offer his technical and educational experience, all of the curriculum that he's written over his entire career, and his background as a professional, and all of his connections to our program, should we adopt him. David said he would meet again with any one of you, each one of you if you want. He also has extended, I believe, next week he has open house at his school, and he's extended it for the superintendent and a board or 2 member if they would like to go. He just asked that you would let me know the next day or 2 so that he can arrange as a dinner and an open house there if you would like to visit his program. Entertain any questions that you may have.
That dinner's on Tuesday, October the 12th at 5:30.
Please.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Very good presentation, and I agree with everything you say. Being an engineer at Sikorsky, there's definitely a shortage of tool and die makers and CNC programmers, and they're really concerned in general about the future of kids not going into that field. And everybody's driving their kids, pushing their kids to college and stuff like that, and there's a serious lacking in that field. I was wondering too if you've considered at all additive manufacturing.
So part of the program that we currently actually have right now is we've got the small 3D printers. In the past, I've written grants. We're actually on our second generation of those. That came through the Perkins grant last year. So we do have 4 of them in our classroom right now. We had 5 previously, but I kind of timed out their lifespan. And actually one that I wrote a grant for maybe 9 or 10 years ago when it first came out, a big machine. So yeah, we do have additive, and we would definitely have that as part of this program in the annual Perkins grant. Some of the things that Mr. Fine and I talked to you about is with the Library of Media Science, having a maker space so that when students have personal time, they'd be able to go there, utilize some of the CAD programs and CAM programs, and utilize some of the additive manufacturing, which is a much smaller, safer format, in order to produce parts or anything else that's creative at that time. So, yes.
There's a significant push at Sikorsky to go with additive manufacturing, and it's still relatively premature with regards to putting those kind of parts on a helicopter.
Sure.
Obviously, that's a serious safety concern. So, and we're finally getting cooperation with the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines too to start to buy into that. So I think that would be, anything you can do along those lines would probably surely guarantee a decent job for the kids.
Thank you.
The certification for the teacher, what is the certification for that kind of teacher?
So there's 2 different paths that could happen with that. One of them is your traditional technology education teacher. The other certification path is the person who would be doing it would, I believe, have to take 33 credits in education, some of them in special education, in order to qualify and then apply to the state of Connecticut. They would obviously have years of experience in this area in order to be certified, but they would have to have that educational background as well. So that could be potentially one of the crux of the issue.
Do we have anyone that is cross-certified that might be interested?
No. It's been very difficult with technology education.
Mr. Tuttle doesn't have any connection for it. Next time I see him, I'll see if he has anybody to recommend to us. But,
You may or may not.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kristen.
So, 2 questions. The first is, because when Mr. Freund was talking about the need to fill a library meeting space, I was thinking in my mind, is there grants that we can apply for, whether they're through National Library Associations or whether it's from the ESSER grant? And so I think about that in the context of this as well. Is there federal grant money under the ESSER code funding bucket that could potentially fund some of this for us? Especially the part.
I think it's definitely worthwhile to go and look for it. Mr. Tuttle, he believes there's grant funding out there.
Yeah.
For some, not a majority of the equipment. Again, I can't attest to that because we haven't gotten that part where he sits down with me and shows me those particular things.
Yeah.
But I know from speaking to the people at the symposium this summer at Southern Connecticut State University, they echo that same sentiment.
The key is getting the grant money. I mean, if we could get $200,000 worth of equipment, it wouldn't be so hard to come and ask the board for a teacher.
Right.
It's just getting this amount totally for the equipment. And that's why we really want support in every way that we can. I know for a select woman, this has been very dear to your heart as well, and the importance of this. And I just want to say, Mr. Lucky, a great presentation, and to Mr. Tuttle as well. And thank you for all of the time that you've spent, and we hope that this can move forward.
I completely agree. Thank you very much.
The competitive grants, hopefully they're not based on the ability to pay, are they, do you know?
I honestly couldn't tell you because I was waiting to see what your pleasure was here at the board before jumping into the next piece. Obviously, we don't have that all set up yet, but
No,
we'll only jump in and start tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Beth.
And just in terms of funding, I think there's also a huge opportunity for private sponsorship in terms we have a lot of manufacturers in the area, we have the Connecticut Manufacturers Association, we have some big corporations, we have some small, so I think that perhaps there could be some assistance at the board level if we need to.
The partnership,
raise funds,
the
things like
sponsor.
that we can lean on some of our board members.
Well, I'm also hoping that our two elected officials can assist us with that too, especially with the, you know, our industrial park and,
Yes.
you know, our companies up there. And at the state level, obviously, to help us, because, you know, more people pushing for Seymour, the better it is, than it's just less. So, and if we're collaborative, and I know that's one of Mrs. Vaughn's goals, more collaboration, you know, that would be a way that we may be able to get some grants. It's not just Board of Ed.
So with grants and also with business donations or sponsors, that could possibly become a reality, but that's where we're at. So we'll come back with the next steps. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just another comment. I know
Go ahead.
at one point at Sikorsky, they did have a high school internship program. For some reason, I don't think it exists anymore, but I know they would bring kids in and they would be working side by side with certain operators. And they were paid, I think, too, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that will also be one of the crux of the issue is those experiences have to be paid. If they're not paid, I was just on a seminar with the state of Connecticut, if they're not paid, then there has to be a certified team that goes through some pretty extensive paperwork background and follow-ups with the employer.
That may be why they might not be doing it anymore.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I don't know. Sometimes it just get too difficult, you know?
Through the Department of Labor, there's a very lengthy process, and I was just on that workshop last week. So I don't know how many schools are really going that route anymore, just because of the bogged down paperwork that needs to be done. I understand the safety aspects for the kids, and we don't want the kids being taken advantage of, but sometimes you gotta have that partnership, it's gotta be easy.
Right.
It's just not.
Thanks, that was really good. Any other questions?
I want to say to the student representatives, if you feel the need to leave now because you have obligations, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting. Your choice.
Study.
Nobody else started. Okay, moving along to a bus update from Dr. Compton.
I'll be very brief. We're so thankful for Pat Bull and all that she does. I'd just like to share that since the last week of September, we've been down 4 bus drivers in Seymour. One driver will be returning tomorrow. We currently have 5 drivers in the Seymour lot, which consists of Ansonia, Derby, and Beacon Falls. We're hoping, also with the help of the office staff, they've really been tremendous in helping us, and they've been doubling up runs, and they've really been a team for us. We just want to say also with special ed, Dr. Bull, and what your secretary has done as well in working with those buses. So right now, on the average, the elementary runs are clearing between around 428 and 438. So, you know, we definitely had a lot of support with All-Star. And also our first select woman offered assistance in regards with Public Works and those people that have CDL license. But thank goodness we survived that day when some people were calling out. Thank you.
Okay, going along to E now, under 8, and that's Mrs. Tenza. Assessment update.
So I provided the board with just a general overview of assessments. Dr. Compton informed me that we're going to hit you hard in November with specific data, but I did want to just kind of give you an overview of where we are at. Currently, our students in K-12 just finished last week their MAP assessments, which occur 3 times a year. So the teachers and administrators and I, we are, looking at that information now, and teachers are using it for student goal setting, instructional planning, and trying to figure out the, as we put it, just right instructional places. Students next week in grades 9, 10, and 11 will take the PSAT. So that's something to look forward to. And this year, our middle school opted not to administer the PSAT to 8th grade. They may consider it again next year, but they really wanted to focus their time on instruction, and we supported that decision. And last March, we had almost 140 students in grade 11 take the SAT on the annual school day, and our overall results are consistent in the fact that students score higher in language arts, ELA, evidence-based reading and writing, than they do in math across the board, and that stayed true. So the good news is we're consistent, and we weren't that far off our benchmarks from prior years. Remember that we really don't have data from the year prior to compare to. So it really puts a twist on growth comparison. We also received recently, families probably, actually just this week, are getting mailed home their child's Smarter Balanced assessments from grades 3 through 8, and in grade 11 for national, the NGSS. And again, those remained consistent in that we scored higher in ELA than we did in math. Again, we don't have data from last year to benchmark it, and the Smarter Balance does often show achievement and growth. So right now they're just focusing on achievement. As a matter of fact, the state completely changed their individual logon site for administrators so that you can't actually even see and compare right now to growth from prior years. They don't want you looking at growth. They really want you to try to focus on where the kids are. So this is the second year in a row that the state of Connecticut has agreed not to use test results for school accountability. And hopefully that frees us up to really try to learn how our students are doing and figure out what interventions and supports they need. And I think the one thing that I'd like to say is that our staff have worked very hard, and they're showing us the difference between what you would say is scaffolding and watering down. So if you scaffold instruction, you're gonna help them get to grade level standards, and if you water down instruction, you're gonna weaken it, and they're never gonna get there. And I think across the board, that our teachers in every grade level and in every discipline are working really hard to scaffold to build and not to water down. So
Very good, and with the rigor and with the differentiation. And that's what the scaffolding is doing. So I thought it'd be great for her to give you that assessment update.
Any questions? For Mrs. Penn? Yes.
I have a question, understanding that we are in a really unique situation that we never want to be in again with students who really didn't learn what students in other years in those grades would have learned. Have there been conversations about, so I hear what you're saying, we never want to water down. We never want to lower the rigor of what we're expecting students to learn, but have we reconsidered, or are we considering backing away from what seems to some people like a very assignment-based culture? So my question is, have teachers talked about and have they changed their class requirements, not in the spirit of dumbing it down or making it less rigor, but in the spirit of can we learn together rather than assignment, 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 assignment? It feels to me, on a personal level as a parent, and as a person who have peers that are parents, that we just jump right back into the assignment mode that we left off with 2 years ago.
So, that's a good question, and I think what would be really helpful is not only in the administrators' work with their school improvement plans, but in their November updates that they send to the
goals.
board, for them to be able to share with you a little bit about the conversations that they're having with their staff, because our curriculum really is built on essential questions and enduring understandings, the big ideas. And there's no time like now to really just focus on the big idea. And I think that they would really be able, I could tell you that we're walking into rooms. I've spent a lot of time in classrooms already this year. I could tell you what I'm seeing. I think it would be very helpful for them to talk about the conversations they're having that are helping that happen. And at the same time, I can't say here confidently that every single teacher has eliminated the 62 long division multiplication questions, because I can't speak to that.
But truly more project-based, and then when you think more with the high school as well as moving towards really more capstone projects and really more authentic, hands-on. Same thing with the STEM and the innovativeness that they're doing with the middle
If you
school.
looked at that and you think about,
Yeah.
if we really, really embrace that, would we need an alternative school? I don't know.
Go ahead, Jay, and I'll come back.
Well, I just want to follow to Mrs. Harmon's point that I don't disagree with what she's saying, but at the same time, I think that the guidelines, so to speak, or the state still needs to move that ball, or move that
Yes.
needle forward too, because you're already seeing that revert back to the evaluation plans still being somewhat similar to they were 2 years ago, but not as much flexibility. So you still, as a teacher, have that obligation, the onus or responsibility to,
Have some data.
get to
Yeah.
that same place you were 2 years ago.
Oh,
The means of how you get there is changing, but you
Yeah.
still have to get there based on, you know
Very
what I'm saying?
absolutely, and I totally hear,
Yeah,
and
it's excellent.
if we didn't still have to get there, that would be reducing.
Some of the.
That's the watering down,
expectations.
right.
What
Yeah.
what I'm really more focused on is the
Basic.
way we get there. Sometimes I almost feel like it's this unintended consequence of power school or any automatic grading mechanism, where it has become so much easier to enter a daily grade for a missing assignment, a complete assignment. 40 years ago when all that, 20 years ago, 10 years ago when all that had to be done by hand, teachers thought twice between giving homework and assignments every single day. It was more difficult to, so I don't think we should back off the end goal at all. I just wonder if, given what our students have been through for the past 18 months, there can be more sharing to prove learning in a verbal, collaborative, conversational way, rather than the requirement to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard to show work on a daily kind of basis. That's all.
And again, I think that's a great,
It's very
great
true.
statement. I think the administrators can do a very nice job
So
of sharing some of the, I see it. Here's a Jamboard, just quickly post what you're thinking. I see a lot of that
A lot of
collaborative work
innovative
happening.
thinking.
But I think it should really come from them. I don't think you need to see what I'm seeing.
We'll let them
but-
discuss in November, because it's all going to be about goals in November.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Right.
And no, I don't mean that the end goal shouldn't necessarily, but I guess my point is, it leads us to maybe have that conversation more about standards based.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have that hard, at the end, that hard score, so to speak, or that hard, number, where you were talking about. So, because even now when you do your evaluation, you're still coming with a score, so to speak.
You do this year, right.
And you're still tied to that number game. So
But you don't need to get to the score by assigning an assignment 3-4 times a week that gets a grade. You still don't have to do that. You just don't have to do that. You can do homework grade of 0, 1, 2, walking around the room, checking it, just to make sure it's done, and it's complete. It doesn't have to be the, do this, hand this in, do this, hand this in, do this, hand this in, do this, submit it. Do you know what I mean?
I do, but my point is that when you get that bigger level, when you get that bigger shift,
Yes.
I think you're going to see less of that. But we still need that bigger wave to come through.
I guess I'm not connecting the dots on that, because I'm not connecting the dots. Because the variety across the way teachers choose to approach that is vast. And so you will have 2 teachers teaching the same topic. One is very assignment driven. The other one is more project driven.
Right.
More, you might get, 15 grades entered into the system for the semester versus another teacher, same topic, has 60 numbers of representing something in the system. So it's just, I don't think we're aligned, and I think there was an inclination to jump back in and catch up and do what we were doing 2 years ago, and I don't know that our students were.
Well, that's why a lot of elementary schools have done standards-based. They don't give grades, they do standard-based. And that's, that's why that's better in regards, and as the middle school and the high school, there's some, I think that's, again, innovative thinking on down the road. Same thing with what universities are doing. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Dr. Boyle, you are up.
All right, well, good evening, and I'll start by saying that when we met 3 weeks ago, I told you that we would have intervention data for today's meeting. We have some final meetings tomorrow, so actually I could have, with the superintendent's support, data regarding that going out to you before the end of the week. So I apologize, I don't have that specifically tonight. But, the preliminary data that I have about 3/4 of the data available. We have a lot of kids getting tier 2 and tier 3 intervention that I'm sure will spark some further conversation next month. That being said, we're fairly status quo. Our number of out-of-district students has remained the same over the last month. Where you will see a shift in that first graph is with an increase in the number of students with IEPs in district. What I think is important for the board to be aware is a large percentage of that increase is students who have recently, within the last couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, moved into district with IEPs. Under normal circumstances, it's not really something of note, but a few of those students specifically have, very intensive IEP programs, some of which are going into our specialized programs. So it's something that I'm certainly monitoring, and if it creates anything that has a financial implication, I'll be bringing that forward to the board. But right now, I just bring it to your attention so that you're aware of it. Otherwise, we have had a subtle increase in number of 504s, special ed hours that correlate with the number of IEPs, but nothing that's wholly unexpected at this point in the year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Dr. Boyle? Okay. Moving along to chairman's comments, I said enough. Moving on to board member comments. Anyone else? Any other board members? Any comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
I'm going to be very brief tonight. I think that it's been excellent this evening to really focus on student and staff recognition and principal recognition as well. I think it's also been important to really bring the focus back on student achievement with the board and updates, and I think the reports tonight were very good. So I really wanted to have that emphasis, so that's why I'm not going to talk very much. I'd just like to say the reposting of the business manager position was sent out. For those in the public that may not be aware, our #1 candidate that was selected for the job has decided to take another position elsewhere. And we received that news this past week. So we now have it posted, so we're still looking for a school business manager. If anybody also would like to reapply, they can do that as well. We're just starting the whole process over again. I just want to mention that tomorrow night I'm going to be attending the Board of Selectmen meeting at 7 o'clock. We're going to be giving the first select woman definitely a card of gratitude and a book and a little something else. Just in our appreciation to her and the support of our working together, and this has been going since September the 1st. I also want to mention Wednesday I'll be attending Chatfield Presti's PTA meeting. I'll be there to meet and greet with the parents and say a few words, a little bit of a superintendent forum. And then also I'm going to be joining Bungie on October the 14th as well. And I'll be discussing with them. We thought this would be a good opportunity to combine the PTA. That way I'll have a few people come to listen. It's always great to work with the PTA or you won't have an audience. The other thing I just want to say about where I've talked about a Seymour Public School Advisory Committee, we want to set that for Thursday, October the 28th, here at 6:30. I haven't checked with the principal yet here to make sure it's clear. Several people have indicated that they'd like to serve on this committee. It was something that I promised in my platform and I've discussed with you all. You will see the list of names, any input, and whoever else would serve. I think Chris Campaign, you have definitely been nominated or recommended to serve on this committee. So I know you definitely volunteered for this because I think this is important. A lot of people are valuing that we're going to listen to them. This is one of the things that you emphasized as your platform for me as well. Also, I've just mentioned about the possibility of an evening board retreat after the election. Would still be the old board members and possibility of the newly elected people as well, maybe attending with the Connecticut School Board's trainer consultant, so I'll keep that in mind. Also on Wednesday, November 3rd, that's going to be the presentation of goals, administrators and Stens and myself, and to present data and talk about goals for the rest of the year. We'd hoped to do it this month, but we just couldn't do it all. So basically that concludes, and you can see just some more updates that will come out. Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Thompson? Yes.
Not a question, but you brought up the gratitude. I'm remiss. I got two gratitudes. One from Mrs. Bruno. She wrote a card for SEA for providing dinner at negotiations. And Ms. Niacc gave it to bus drivers. Bus 33.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful.
Spreading. It's rippling.
It's great, thank you. And you'll be on that communication advisory council.
Yes, ma'am.
Committee. Thank you. That's hilarious. So we'll be notifying all the people that definitely want to be a part of it. I think it's crucial.
If we have people we think might be.
Send those names as well. Even send them to Ed or myself. Or Vonda, whatever.
All right, any other questions? Okay, we have information there. If you have any questions for any of the different schools, now is the time to ask, including middle school, Chapter and Bungie. Any questions for any of those reports? Okay, we see the transfer made. Okay, and we move on to staff hiring for attendance positions. Any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. Move on to resignations. Too bad we're losing our paraprofessional of the year.
Yeah, she got an excellent job. She was recruited by a principal, an office position.
Let's do that.
She was recruited.
Okay, and then we move now to the second public comment portion of the meeting. Anyone wishing to speak? Please come forward. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, are you guys aware that you're supposed to hire somebody by the 27th to handle both contracts, according to the state regulations, to cover the religious and business aspect of this? Are you guys aware of that, or? I can send you some papers highlighting the words that show that part within all the state executive orders, if you'd like.
Okay, just please send it to us, because I'm not quite sure I know exactly what you're talking about, but please send it to my
I'll
email.
highlight all the words necessary.
And I'll share it with the board.
And would like me to send it to the board or to you?
We'll send it to all of us. If you send it to me, I'll send it to the board.
All right.
Or you can
Thank
send
you.
it-
Give me a couple of days and I'll have everything prepared. I'll send it to you guys. So at least you guys know who you're supposed to hire, how, to again, deal with the wording in the contracts that covers both aspects of religious and business law. written within the state executive orders, but I'm assuming most people haven't thoroughly read everything yet, so they might have not caught on to that.
The only last executive order I had was on September 22nd about vaccinations.
All right, so I'll highlight all the necessary words and I'll have it sent to your office, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public wishing to comment? Hearing none, the public comment portion is over, and we're still in a motion of adjourn. Peter? Seconded by Chris, or Kristen, all those in favor? Meeting is officially adjourned.